Hey, we have the birth information, and we're going to do the chart for Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. The information that I have is that she was born on October 13th, 1989, Bronx, New York, at 11:50 a.m. or 10 minutes before noon. So this is very exciting, and thank you very much to the intrepid and very generous staffer who got that information out to us. So some things that I want to remind you guys about before we get into the chart work, about times. First thing, times can be off by a few minutes or a lot of minutes, depending on what was going on at the time that the delivery was occurring. Because remember, in a hospital, when a baby is being born, or even at home, it's even more of an issue, right? They're not worried about the time on the clock. They're worried about making sure the baby is breathing and the baby is the right color and all the fingers and toes and everything's where they're supposed to be, and that the mother's not bleeding out and that everything's okay. So once all that is under control, then they'll take a look at the clock. Now, in earlier generations, this is more of an issue than it was, or certainly is in modern times. However, this is not to say that a time of birth cannot be off by a few minutes. So, and if you're in a better hospital with a lot more money, you'll typically have like a NASA team in attendance. So you've got literally everybody with a special function, including clock watcher. No kidding. But not everybody is being born in that kind of, hospital, that kind of resources. So there's that. Now, the reason this is important is because you have the ascendant is going to move 1 degree every 4.5 minutes, give or take. Now, what that means is that if a birth time is off by more than 5 minutes, it's going to change. It potentially could change a lot of things significantly. Because what it will do is it will move the angles, the ascendant and the midheaven, off by a minute or two, which could be a couple of degrees. And it'll also change those house cusps, because the cusps, all those angles and cusps are math calculations, right? And anybody who does anything that involves math calculations will tell you that one little number or one little decimal point can throw everything off, right? One decimal point in your bank account can make a huge difference. So this becomes important because mostly when you start getting into predictive work or timing events, like looking at the blueprint of a person's life and looking at the timeline of events that we can expect to see, a couple of minutes here or there, those angles being off by a degree or two can make a huge difference in the accuracy of the timing for the events as we're basing it on that birth time. So, we have a time of 11:50 a.m. This is what we're going to go with. We're going to assume it's accurate within 5 minutes or less. But there's always a possibility it could be off by a minute or two. And if that's the case, then the timing of events will be significantly off by months or more. But we'll see. I think this is okay. But the natal chart, the individual natal chart, unless they're born very, very close to the end of a sign or the beginning of a sign, like, Agent Orange in Office, like it supposedly is born at 29 degrees, 58 minutes, literally the last minutes of Leo. His time of birth is off, which I'm completely convinced it is. Okay, he's actually Virgo rising. And in situations like that with a natal chart, this becomes important because your ascendant is your chart ruler. So the difference is what planet and what set of planetary combinations literally gives us the picture of who we're dealing with. In the case of, Bazooka Joe here, if he's Leo rising, he's got a Sun-Uranus conjunction in the 10th house, which doesn't fit him at all because a Sun-Uranus together gives you somebody who's incredibly honest. I've never met a Uranian or an Aquarian that were not embarrassingly and uncomfortably honest. That's just the way they are, bless their hearts. On the other hand, if he is Virgo rising, 0 Virgo rising, or 0 degrees, so many minutes Virgo rising, or more, he is now Mercury ruled, which means that Mercury-Neptune square, which, by the way, is the pattern that you typically see with people who have a generous, flexible relationship with the truth, pathologically, or artists. He's obviously not an artist, so he's the other expression. That would be his chart ruler, and that would give us the clear description of who we're dealing with. So you tell me, if he's Leo rising and Sun Uranus rules his chart, where's the Aquarian honesty here, right? And if he's Virgo rising with a Mercury square Neptune, which is typically what you get with people who have very loose relationships with the truth, does that fit? And the thing to remember is when you're looking at a chart, all those planets are still there. They're not going away. So even with a Mercury-Neptune square ruling chart, he's still a Sun-Uranus conjunction. The difference is, because it doesn't rule his ascendant, that Sun-Uranus now plays second fiddle to the chart ruler, Mercury-Neptune, which gives you a pathological liar who's a nutbag, like a total like doo-doo, right? Right, a dodo bird, okay? If it were the other way around, you would have somebody who is a Sun-Uranus conjunction who's really like a truth freak, and time would be very, Sun-Uranus people are always early. Uranians, Aquarians are usually early. They hate people being late, and they're usually early, annoyingly so. I've never known them to be late. So the other thing is Neptune is always late for stuff, right? So that's something else to look at. I don't follow him that closely, but if he's got a habit of showing up late for things, literally being on his own time kind of thing, then that's Neptune. That's not Uranus. But let's say he's Leo rising, he's got Sun Uranus ruling the chart, right? So, okay, so we're not seeing the honesty here. We're seeing a lot of eccentric, bizarre, not great expressions of Uranus. But Mercury and Neptune would still be there as well. It doesn't disappear because it's not the chart ruler. So in that case, with a Sun-Uranus conjunction ruling the chart and a Mercury-Neptune square in the chart, what you would have is somebody who literally is living in their own la-la land, right? But very, very specifically, the thing that would be signature with that particular combination with the Sun-Uranus ruling the chart is you would have somebody who has a real issue with time. Time would be a big problem for them because they're completely out of step with everybody all the time. So that would be more of a signature of somebody with like autism, right? Or Asperger's syndrome, because they're literally on their own little timeline in the world that has nothing to do with like everybody else, literally constantly being out of step with people. But listen, that's just me. I'm just one astrologer. So that's when that little 5 minutes can make a huge difference in somebody's chart. So we're going to go with 11:50 a.m. for Miss Cortez, Ocasio Cortez. And let's see what we got. All right, boys and girls, we have the birth chart for Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. So I got to tell you, I have a little bias here. I am a fangirl. There are some interesting things about this chart, and I'm going to start with the first thing. Apparently there was, listen, astrologers and opinions and people all across the map. You're going to get them from one extreme to the other. And there are some folks who would say, if they didn't know this was her chart, this is not the chart of a politician. So before we get into it, here's a couple of things I want to point out. One, it's extremely difficult to select or specify an occupation looking at a chart. And here's the reason why. Ready? A lot of times what we can do is we can tell what is a better fit for someone, utilizing their strengths and their natural temperaments. But it's very difficult to say that they should be like a doctor, a lawyer, a computer programmer, or whatever. And the reason is a lot of the jobs that this person may come into in their lifetime don't exist at the time that this reading was done. If we had done Alexandria's chart back in 1989 for her parents, like brand new baby born, where parents are doing her chart for her, we didn't even have cell phones back then, for God's sakes. And a lot of the work that's done with computers and technologies now didn't exist back then. So the thing about it is that we can find somebody who's got a real aptitude and temperamentally is more inclined to working independently in things like computer or software fields. But back in the day, these things didn't exist. So how on earth would you tell somebody that this is what they would be doing, right? So even now, as fast as things are changing and moving in terms of industry and technologies, it's almost impossible to specify, oh, well, you'll be doing this job in the future, because a lot like listen to oh my gosh, who was that prophet? Like a Nostradamus prophecy? Like we can kind of get a vague description of it, but it's really hard to give it a name because it doesn't exist yet, right? So with this said, you can't say, well, this person, will absolutely become a politician or this person will do that. It doesn't work like that. And if you can pull occupations and professions out of your hat like that, then you're probably I don't know, maybe you're a clairvoyant psychic, but I've yet to see an astrology chart allow or lend itself to that kind of specificity, especially given that industry and occupations change labels and definitions so much moving forward. So, blah, blah, blah. We're going to start there. Now, there were some astrologers who have gone on record saying that this is absolutely the worst chart for somebody who's going to go into politics. Blah 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 blah. And I won't mention the astrologer's name that I saw who was quoted for saying this, but he's a Jesus. Anyway, not the most credible astrologer on the planet. Okay, so let's look at this and let's put this in the framework of, could this person potentially be a politician? Would this person be successful as a politician? Well, Chuchi Pie, I don't know. Let's take a look. So first thing for her is we're looking at the Midheaven, which is the professional direction or occupation that we might aspire to in this lifetime. So Libra is at the top of her chart. Her chart Midheaven, her Midheaven ruler, her 10th house ruler is Venus right here in Sagittarius. And it is, I don't know why this pen is so thick. I am so sorry. It is there in that 12th house. Now, you might look at that. Typically, when people see stuff in the 12th house, the first thing they think are doctors and nurses, right? Healthcare professionals, and psychiatrists and psychologists, and also people with nervous breakdowns. People are in crisis. But the thing to remember is that this also represents the underdog. So wherever you see things involving the 12th house or being ruled by the 12th house, one of the many things that also rules are people who are underrepresented. So the Special Olympics kids are very 12th house issues. These are people who rely on the charity and mercy of other people to survive because they are handicapped in that way. So the homeless, the special needs, the disabled, the elderly, the infirm, the poor, all those things that are represented as people who need other people to advocate for them because they are at such a disadvantage. That is the 12th house. So with her occupation ruler in that 12th house, it's not unthinkable that at some point in her life she would get involved in occupations where she was advocating for the disadvantaged in some way, manner, shape, or form. The other thing is that the 12th house is a Neptune house, which rules alcohol and bars. And Sagittarius is all about a good time. So it's not unthinkable that she would work in some place where, entertainment and libations, are a focal point for the business and would have done very well at it. It's also not unthinkable that she might have worked in a mental institution. I don't think she did, but you see where I'm going with this, right? So there's a number of possibilities that she could have gone in as far as directions with this 10th house ruler in the 12th house. Now, the other thing that we're looking at is she's got Mercury near that Midheaven. So communication and speech and acting as a mouthpiece, as it were, and sharing of information back and forth, and acting as an intermediary. See that, Libra, right? All of these things would be very important for her. So anything that she does in terms of her occupational profession would be something that allows her to not only express herself, but would make her ability to communicate the focal point of her job. So this is not somebody who would necessarily be prone or successful in occupations where her sole purpose was to follow orders and do physical work, and follow directions, because this is Mercury strong like this. This is somebody who needs to communicate and needs to talk and needs to interface with people. That's where they shine the best. So certainly she could have taken other jobs, but she wouldn't have done as well with them. And of course, this absolutely describes somebody who would work as a bartender. This also would describe somebody who would work well as a teacher or a coach. And this is obviously somebody who would work well as a politician. And if not a politician, she would have done very well as, I don't know what the word is for these people. They're like lobbyists or something. Not a lobbyist, but they're the people who go in and try to persuade Congress people to do what their I want to call them owners, but they're not their employers. The people they work for, to do what the people they work for want them to do. All right, so there's that. Now, so far we're not really seeing anything that says like politician, 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 right? So where is this? So we're gonna put a thumbtack in that thought right there for a second. Now we're gonna go to the rest of the chart. So remember when we were talking about the time of birth is only important when we're really close to the end or the beginning of a sign, because that changes the chart ruler, right? Well, lucky for us, she's born right smack in the middle of Sagittarius rising. So we're not worried about that 5 minutes here or there with her. She's definitely Sagittarius rising. Good Lord. So Sag rising, Jupiter is your chart ruler, and Jupiter's in the 7th house. So this is going to give us a couple of things. Anytime you've got somebody with Sag rising, you've got somebody who by their typical nature and temperament are usually very forgiving, very driven by principle, always on the go, very active, and they're always trying to look for the bigger picture in things. They're usually optimistic. They're not prone to wallowing in self-pity. That's not their trip at all. And usually with Sag rising, one of the characteristics of Sag rising are either a gap in the front teeth or really long strides. So one of the things that's noticeable with Sag rising is not necessarily that they walk fast as much as they take long steps. These guys take these, Jesus, I don't know how to describe it. I can't keep up because my legs don't have that kind of span, but wow, it's like trying to keep up with a horse. Because those legs just take these long steps. Oh my gosh. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So the chart ruler, so let's get back to the chart ruler. So the chart ruler tells us a lot about who we're dealing with, right? So, and again, like, you know, the person who shall go unnamed, that is in office, the highest office in the land right now, that also has sun in the 10th house. She has the sun in the 10th house, okay? The difference is her chart ruler, right, which is right here, Jupiter, is in the 7th. So this tells us a lot about who she is separate from the sun. So with Jupiter ruling the chart in the 7th house, and it's in Cancer, this does a couple of things. One, the chart ruler being in the 7th makes her very people-oriented. She's very much, what is what I'm looking for? She's not an advocate, or she's like like a diplomat. She works between people. She works best when she's bringing people together. That is her thing. So acting as the intermediary, or that's a Gemini thing. Sorry. She works best as a diplomat or a partner with people because she's very much about bringing things together because that's a Libra function. Sorry. I'm so excited. I'm like, so, and she's already a Libra. She's got 3 planets in Libra. So this further emphasizes all this Libran quality. This is somebody who works best in situations where the cooperation of other people is required. Now, this is not because she's a doormat, not this one. Oh my Lord, no. But because she works better in situations where negotiation is required. So she's very, very good. And with that Sag rising, this would absolutely confirm this. She's very good and very interested in a fair play deal. So she wants everything to be a win-win situation, not win-lose. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Now, sometimes you'll get people that are heavily Libran, a lot of Libra emphasis in their chart that are not win-win scenarios. Like they're very much about win-lose or extremely hyper-competitive. But not this one. Not this one. She could be because she's got that moon in Aries, and moon in Aries is very competitive. But with all this Libra, right, and that beautiful Venus in that 12th house, and then this we're going to come to in a second right here. This is not somebody who's about winners and losers. This is somebody who's very much about, you know, win-win scenarios for everybody. So the other side of this is we look at that Jupiter, right? Because that is the chart ruler, where Jupiter's in the sign of Cancer. So what does that tell us? Well, Jupiter in Cancer tells us, one, because Jupiter loves being in Cancer. It's an extremely strong position for it because it is the sign of its exaltation. So this tells us that she benefits from partnering with other people. She works really well with other people, and other people like working with her. So this is a strong suit for her and will always be a strong suit. She's always going to have very strong allies in her corner, whatever she does in life, which is phenomenal. We need that. The other thing is that with Jupiter and Cancer, it brings out the best parts of Jupiter and Cancer. So this is somebody who genuinely wants everyone to be okay, right? Listen, I'm good with that. I'm so good with that. The other thing that I think is important about this Jupiter is because remember, this rules the chart. So everything we're seeing with this Jupiter colors the entire chart, right? So look at this for a second. We've got literally a grand cross happening with her chart ruler. This is some impressive stuff. Now, I know some people are like, well, I don't know what the hell that means. Well, darling, I'm going to tell you. So typically, I know it looks like a nuclear radiation sign, right? So typically when you have an opposition or a square separately, or even a T-square, what you get are some really tough aspects. And the thing about it is, these challenging or difficult aspects have two faces. So on the one hand, they're going to show where things are extremely difficult for a person. But on the other hand, if they work through that and they work with that energy, you're going to find that this is the most dynamic person in the room. This is doubly and triply so, quadruply so, if there's such a word, for people who have grand crosses in their chart. Whenever you see somebody who's got a grand cross in your chart, you are looking at somebody who, once they get momentum up and they get going, they literally move with a force of a speeding freight train. These people are unstoppable. And typically, here's the fascinating part. Everybody I've ever known with a grand cross in your chart, you never know it to look at them, because on the outside, they're super peaceful and calm, kind of, all over it. Like there's nothing about their external presence or presentation that makes you think like, oh my Lord, let me get out of the way. They're not. They're usually very even keel and very, very smooth surface calm. But these people are literally freight trains of power when they decide it's time to get stuff done. I've never seen anybody with grand crosses in chart that were not amazingly dynamic in terms of their goals and their list of things to do. So this is a phenomenal aspect. This is somebody who is driven, who is always going to be driven for whatever their goals and agendas are. And listen, if you're going to be a politician and get anything done in that clown car posse circus we've got for a government right now, you need to have a lot of that. So far, this is what we have. So could this person be a politician? Sure, of course, they could. If they decide to, they have with this chart, they have the tenacity, the drive, and the will, and more importantly, as a politician, the backup and goodwill of other people to the nth degree. This person engenders a lot of loyalty from people, naturally engenders loyalty to get a lot of stuff done. Brilliant stuff. So this is a really dynamic chart. Now, the thing that I thought was interesting is, now remember, this is the chart ruler, right? So we've got her moon, and we've got Sun, Mars, and Mercury. So before we even get to the first house, right here, these planets, we've got all her personal planets involved. Her Sun, which rules her identity, her Moon, which rules her innate expression, Mars, which rules her drive and her assertiveness, and Mercury, her communication skills. All of these things are wrapped up as part of this Grand Cross, making these things very, very tight and fundamental and integral to who she is in essence. Now, before we get into the first house, that by itself is going to make this a difficult person to stay employed, because they're going to have a very, very hard time, unfortunately, following the leadership of lesser people. And God forbid the leadership's like an idiot. So, luckily, this one gets along really well with other people, but this would be a hard sell for pretty much most jobs. So, employers would have had quite the handful with this character. Now, with all this, let's go over here. And now we've got the first house involved. So this person, everything that they live, breathe, and do in life is very much hooked into their very core identity. So they're not going to do less in life because they can't. Strong first house people have such a strong need to have a meaningful identity in the world that they absolutely will not bow their heads and settle for less and compromise on their life or their identity. They would literally rather go down in flames than to rise to mediocrity and hang out there and coast for the rest of their life. That's not their thing. First house people do not do that. Now, with this chart, she's got Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune all tight together in that first house. More importantly, look at that. Look at that. She's got Saturn in Capricorn. Remember, we've been talking about Saturn in Capricorn all this year, because Saturn in Capricorn, Saturn in its rulership in Capricorn is about wisdom, right? And it's very much about integrity and ethics and doing things the right way and the things we leave behind, right? Legacy. What do we leave behind? What are the things that really matter in life? Saturn in Capricorn in a natal chart is a taskmaster because these people don't get a break ever. So when you have first house planets right here, you're going to have literally, you're going to attract challengers no matter what. Like you're standing there breathing and somebody's going to challenge you on it. Well, I just don't think that that breathing is appropriate. Oh my God. Yeah, first house planets are a pain. So there's that. With her, with Saturn in Capricorn in that first house, she would have spent much of her life being challenged from very early on and literally without a break, because Saturn in Capricorn will test your mettle and it will make you stronger or it will break you. That's pretty much your choices. It's like the Marine drill instructor that never really goes away. The thing about it though is with that particular placement, if you can survive it, you will come out of this a much, much stronger person and a much wiser person. And literally, it would take an act of freaking God to upset you or make you lose your cool, because at the end of the day, you've been there, done that. Literally, you've been practicing like a boxer, like working your way up the ranks for these things your entire life since childhood. So it would take a heck of a challenger to get you like react badly, as it were, or just having a bad day. But mostly, it's just not going to happen. Now, with her, some interesting things about this. So the first thing I want to go to is here, right? Uranus rising. Remember we talked about Uranus being the honesty thing? I'm telling you, man, Uranians and Aquarians, your mileage may be different. I have yet to see any of them that are not uncomfortably honest. Damn them. So here's a pro tip. If you ever want someone to make you feel better about yourself and, be kind to your ego, they are not the people to go to. So like if you just bought a dress that you absolutely love and you really want this to look as good on you as you think it looks in your mind, do not go to your Aquarian or Uranian friend and ask them, because they'll tell you the truth, even if it's not what you want to hear. So I'm just saying, Uranian Aquarian people have a very special relationship with the truth, which does not which does not curry favor with the people around them sometimes. So Uranus is in her first house. This is somebody who's a truth freak. Like it's got to be right, it's got to be true, it's got to be correct, got to be accurate. Like, what do you mean the emperor's not naked? Well, I can see his. Like, this is Uranus in the first house. Whew, God bless. And then, of course, we have Saturn, which we talked about, right? Now, Saturn, here's something interesting for you guys. Saturn and Neptune conjunct within a minute, which is almost on top of each other, which is fantastic. Saturn and Neptune, some people would say that this is a really difficult placement, or I don't even know what they would say. I don't really care. But whatever negative thing that they're saying about it, I can probably guarantee you that it's not true or accurate, because Saturn and Neptune is a powerful position. This is the position of the magician. So for those of you young folks out there who have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, the thing to understand with this is going to do, because these are generational. This whole thing right here, it's all this is all generational, right? She just happens to carry it right there in that first making up. Very, very active and visible in her chart. This whole configuration is the configuration of the magician, right? Saturn builds, Neptune visualizes. So if Neptune can dream it, Saturn can build it. And Uranus will bring along technology to make it happen faster. So with Saturn and Neptune together, what you're going to get is a propensity to, not depression, but they used to call it melancholy, literally where the weight of the world like rests on your head so heavy that it's almost unbearable to get out of bed and face the day. That's not the same thing as depression, right? Just so you guys know. Melancholy, or literally feeling the weight of the world, that's a whole different experience. And typically older people feel this because they've hit a point in their life where they're no longer relevant, or as powerful as they used to be. So their ability to act is limited by their years that they've accumulated and the position that they're in. But they're wiser and they understand what they're looking at now. So oftentimes older people will see situations that they are ineffective to change as much as they would like to. And that weighs heavy on them because they're running out of time right about the time that they finally understand how things are supposed to work. So that feeling is melancholy, right? And people who have Saturn Neptune like this, even when they're young, will often have this feeling of melancholy you know, as if the weight of the world is just too much. You know, it's too much to look out there and see what's ahead of them. Which, for those of you who are quick to become cynical about everything, you know who you are, you bunch of computer jockeys. No, this is not the same thing as cynicism. This is not the same thing as saying, oh, well, you know, all politicians are the same. There's no point in voting. It's never going to change. That's not this. The cynicism that you're talking about is just lazy thinking. Because when you start talking about, oh, well, you know, it's all the same politicians, nothing's ever going to change, what you're really saying is you're too lazy to actually go out and make an effort. So it's just easier to give up and throw your hands in the air. Not the same conversation as melancholy, which is like, oh, dear God, no matter what I do, I don't know that it's going to be enough. Okay, so there's that. And this is what she has in her first house coming up. So this is somebody who walks around with this hyper awareness of larger issues all the time, and sometimes may actually find it difficult to get out of bed and face the world because, Jesus, like one little voice, what can I do? It's not enough, right? And because it involves her personal planets, right? It's all extremely personal and meaningful for her. So this is really coming from a very deep personal place for her. This is not all lip service, which is nice because her priorities really are, it would appear, to be what's good for everybody. Luckily, she's got very good supportive people that are always going to be there to protect her because she's earned a lot of loyalty in this lifetime. And she is quite the firebrand and quite the powerhouse herself. So, like rock'em sock'em robots, man, she can take a lot before she gets knocked down, and even then she's coming right back up. So she is quite the force to be reckoned with, which is pretty damn awesome. All right, so now this takes us back to, so if that's the case, does this make the chart of a politician? Well, sure, of course it could. So the thing with politicians, the thing to remember is that with politics, ultimately, what you're talking about are two things. One, you have to have very good communication skills, uh, literally very good communication skills. Two, you also have to be able to persuade and influence people, obviously, because that's your whole job is to persuade and influence for policy. And third, you have to be able to garner support, financial support from other people, because that's where your money is coming from to get you where you need to be. So typically with politicians, what we look for is strong 8th house positions. So she has the moon ruling that 8th house, and look at that, it's part of that T-square. So yes, of course, absolutely, this is somebody who would be extremely powerful and charismatic in terms of fundraising and all that sort of stuff. Now, I will tell you a secret. When it comes to politicians, it's also the 11th house that we look at. But with the 8th house is not just politics. With the 8th house, you're going to find people with strong 8th houses, depending on how it's configured. You will also find people who are involved in psychology or psychiatry, the mental health sciences. You'll also find people involved in sex work, which is tantric magic. That's a whole other thing, which also includes, by the way, you dirty birds, get your minds out of the gutter, also includes sex therapists who deal with actual psychological issues that have to do with intimacy and the ability to relate and connect as an adult. It also is the house that rules insurance and taxes and surgery. There's a lot going on with the 8th house, not just politics. But ultimately, all of these things involve a very deep trust from other people. Think about that. All right, because in all those things that I just said in that list, all of these things involve a very deep implicit trust given to that person from someone else. Because you're definitely not trusting your body in surgery, your body and anything else, your money or anything else to somebody that you don't trust. It's just not going to happen. All right. Now, the other thing with politicians is we also look at the 11th house, right? And the reason we look at the 11th house is because the 11th house is the house of groups and strangers, right? It's literally the tribe sort of thing. So we want a strong 11th house because this is somebody who's going to, one, be driven to work on behalf of the group as opposed to just for themselves, like some of the people we're seeing going to jail right now. So the other is that a well-aspected 11th house ruler is going to give us the ability to work more comfortably in groups. It's very hard to be a lone wolf and be a politician because ultimately all that wheeling and dealing you got to do, like you're going to have to do with large groups of people. You got to be able to be part of the group to get stuff done. I mean, you could be a lone wolf and a politician, but I don't think serial killing is the way to convince people to do what you need them to do. I'm just saying. So with the 11th house, so Scorpio rules the house. We've got Pluto in the 11th, and we've got Mars in the 10th. Now, Scorpio has two rulers, ancient and modern. The ancient ruler is Mars, and the modern ruler is Pluto. So we're going to start with the ancient ruler, and then we're going to talk about the modern run in a second. So here, the 11th house ruler, which would rule groups and politicians, right? It's in the 10th house. So, of course, this is somebody who would naturally, no matter what she got involved in, would find herself rising to the top of the group to act as their spokesperson or their leader. Their leader, take me to your leader. She would always find herself being put or pushed into leadership positions on behalf of a group. So, literally, if you put her in charge of the Girl Scouts, she would she would find herself being the spokesperson for her troop. And the problem, of course, is that Mars in Libra is very weak. Mars does not like being in Libra. This is a challenging position. So, and it's in the 10th house. So this is like, well, I don't know. What are we going to do about this, right? How does this work? Well, if you look, Mars and Saturn are in mutual reception by exaltation. So you can theoretically put Mars in Capricorn and it would be very happy there. And you could put Saturn in Libra and it would be very happy there. So and they're involving angular houses, the 1st and the 10th. So for her, what this means is that what she lacks in the ability to get people to follow her lead, because that's what you're going to see a lot with Mars and Libra in the 10th house, just a real difficulty getting people to either take you seriously or follow your lead, right? Because they keep wanting to make you second place. Like you want to be number one and they keep wanting to make you number two. It's a very frustrating thing. Not to mention the fact that there's always that part of you that's kind of poking your boss. So the people ahead of you never really quite feel safe in front of you, and the people behind you are constantly trying to get you behind them. So anyway, but it is in mutual reception with Saturn in the 1st house, which means that when that Mars needs, the cavalry to the rescue, Saturn in Capricorn that 1st is going to do it. And Saturn in Capricorn will fulfill the support position and trade places with that Mars. And then what will happen is all of these things that are Saturn ruled, right? Integrity, hard work, planning, strategies, doing it the right way, doing the right thing, ethics, all of the stuff that goes into really putting your nose to the grindstone, that is what's going to get her through every single time. Because remember, with this planetary alignment that she's got in that 1st house, she's literally from birth. She's had to play by the rules whether she wants to or not. Other people can literally go buck wild crazy out there, but she's got to play by the rules because she will every single time be singled out and hung on a cross where everybody else gets away with it. Scapegoating is a big thing with this position. So they learn very early on they've got to do things the right way if they expect to get anything done, because if somebody's going to get hung for it, it's always going to be them, which is unfortunate because nobody should have to deal with that. But it makes you a stronger person. Remember Saturn's motto, the struggle makes you stronger. All right. So now, what about that Pluto in the 11th house? What's up with that, right? So Pluto and Scorpio, that should be good, shouldn't it? Well, rubbing our little fingers together. This Pluto and Scorpio is going to do a couple of things. So it's an interesting position here. So on the one hand, Pluto and Scorpio in the 11th house is going to draw to you very powerful people and very powerful friends, and also very powerful acquaintances, literally from the highest of the high to the lowest of the low. So she's got friends in all the right and wrong places, and even friends she didn't know she had. Now, because it receives a trine from Jupiter in her 7th house, again, loyalty. She engenders a lot of loyalty from powerful people. So everybody in the middle can have their issues with her, right? And, just listen, petty people are going to do what petty people do, right? But the people who matter, the people who are able to get stuff done, the people who are able to offer her protection and support when the chips are down, it really needs, when business really gets serious, that's when this shows up. So she may have thousands of critics, and this is for anybody with this position. You may have thousands of critics in his lifetime, and literally active saboteurs, which is also Pluto in the 11th house. But at the end of the day, you're always going to have a handful of people at the very highest end and the very lowest end that are looking out for you like guardian angels, whether you're aware of them or not. So that's a good thing. The problem is that this is absolutely the position of the saboteur, because this particular Pluto is conjunct Zubin el-Janubi, which is not such a great fixed star. And Zubin el-Janubi often describes things like debauchery, licentiousness, a lot of dirty bird behavior, the kind of stuff we typically ascribe to the GOP and the current administration and their idea of a good time. Anyway, so yes, senators, you cannot chase around your underage pages anymore. Everybody's going to know about it. So the problem is with this in the 11th house, there is a very active contingency of people who will absolutely try to undermine her from inside her own teams. And she needs to be aware of that. And anybody with Pluto in the 11th house will tell you that the worst betrayals you're ever going to have with this position are always going to be by friends, by people you thought you could trust, which is unfortunate. Now, is there any upside to this? Well, maybe, sort of. No, not really. I mean, it just is. It just is. We'll come back to that in a second. All right. So there's that. Now, one of the things that we're also looking at, if you're not familiar, like right here, these are all parallels in the chart. So the thing that we're seeing here is we've got Saturn, Neptune, Ascendant, Midheaven. Whew, got a whole lot of stuff, Jesus. So we've got Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the Ascendant, and the Midheaven, well, not the Midheaven, but Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the Ascendant all parallel. And what that means is, that this is somebody who operates with a level of integrity and authenticity that is unmistakable. So there's a fiber to her being, a timber to her character that you recognize the moment you meet her. Because the ascendant is who you are. The ascendant is that point of time and space where you become existent as a whole person. And this is who you are. With the Saturn, Uranus, Neptune all there, not only are these qualities unmistakable in her, the other is that she is what we would call starseed. So she's here on a very special purpose because all of these outer planets are connected to that ascendant. And she can certainly choose to not pursue a higher calling, but life would not work as well for her. So as long as she stays high-minded and focused on the big picture and the important things in life, she's golden, like literally golden. So this is one of those times in life when being the good guy actually does protect you and support you. The other thing I want to point out to you guys, I thought was really interesting, right? She's got Pluto she's got Pluto parallel in Midheaven. So this Pluto, this powerful Pluto, right? Remember we talked about friends in high places, well, and low places. This is paralleling her Midheaven, which is her profession, her highest aspiration or destiny in life, and it's trining that Jupiter. So this is somebody who at some point in life will gravitate to a career and find themselves in a position, again, of either significant leadership in high position or very low position. So she could have easily gone in two directions in this lifetime. Thank God she went in the right one. And down here we've got a 90-degree dial, we've got Mars on the ascendant, and we've got Moon and Mercury. So Moon Mercury is going to tell us this is a communicator. This is also somebody who has got the gift of gab, the feel for the man on the street, right? And with that Mars in the ascendant, this is not a pushover. So the thing about it is, remember, she's got all this Libra, right? Chart rulers in 7th house. You know, like it would appear that she's very Libran, right? Very wishy-washy. No. With Mars on that 90-degree dial on her ascendant, this is somebody who is a fighter, and this is somebody who gives as good as she takes and gives better than she takes, actually. So that with all that Capricorn, strong Capricorn on that ascendant as well, This is somebody who's got a spine made of steel. Nancy Pelosi, man, watch out, because this girl's got it. All right, and these are, right, this is the other thing that was interesting. So a relocated chart is when we take your chart and we move it to wherever you've moved to, because that will change your life, and certainly how you experience it. Anybody who's ever had to move because of their job can tell you how everything, in some cases, how everything changed, up to including marriages falling apart, or just a whole lot of stuff. Like where you live has a lot to do with what parts of your personality come to the forefront. So this is Alexandria in the Bronx, and it's her in DC. Now, if you look, the ascendant is pretty much the same, right? A degree also, we're not really seeing a huge difference. But remember I said a degree or two can make a huge change in a chart. So in her birth chart, right here, we've got a 4-degree difference between Mercury and the Midheaven. So it's there, it's close, but it's not exact. Look what happens over here the minute we move her to Washington. The minute we move this girl to Washington, her Mercury, that Mercury in Libra that has to talk, that has to, look at this, that has to communicate, that has to act as the intermediary and the advocate. Now this is absolutely bang, full force and full frontal, right? So literally, if she had moved to Washington D.C. for I don't know what, a babysitting job or to be an au pair, she would have moved to Washington D.C. and that Mercury would have still become even more pronounced. So her words would have had more gravitas. She probably would have picked up a second language, or she would have become like an advocate or a champion of like the babysitters union or something. But that Mercury coming close to that Midheaven like that really, all that mental function of hers, all that communication, all those things are so Mercury in her chart, comes full bore to her professional public presentation. I thought that was pretty interesting. And do we have the midpoints? Nope, I do not have the midpoints. Let me go grab those real quick because they're pretty interesting. Alrighty, so this is her midpoint chart. Now, here's what I thought was interesting. I'm not sure if this is a computer issue, but there's nothing here. The sun is by itself, which I think is pretty bizarre. So if I'm looking at this correctly and that sun is making no midpoint pictures, that means that sun is literally kind of hanging out in space as an agent unto itself. Interesting. So what this means is that 10th house sun of hers is even more significant in terms of not publicity, but the public. So there's something very, very important about her presence in the world for everyone at large. Because when you have got the sun amplified like this, because literally it's not making any aspects, you can't help but notice it. This person becomes very prominent in the consciousness of the people around them. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing, remember that Midheaven, her career ruler is Venus, right? Well, and the sun, which makes no aspects, or it doesn't have any midpoint trees under it, right here, look at this. It is part of a Sun, Venus, Pluto midpoint picture. So this is where we get this charisma. Now you can see charisma and charismatic aspects in a number of different ways in a chart. It's not just one thing, but that definitely lends itself to a lot of charisma, which I thought was really interesting. Her Sun, Moon midpoint, where is that anyway? Let's see, here it is. Look at this. Her Sun, Moon midpoint is part of a Neptune tree, and that means that this is somebody who is absolutely, well, one of two things. Either you have somebody who's absolutely committed to the underdog and championing the unfortunate and the people who are disadvantaged, or you have somebody who basically is a drunk or a drug addict, somebody who's never actually going to quite get it together because they're so uncomfortable in their physical body in the real world. Or you have somebody who's an artist, who's just, channeling all sorts of spiritual beings and all that sort of stuff. So there's a number of different ways this could have played out. And I'm very happy to see that she is doing such amazing work as an advocate and champion. Which isn't to say that she's not an artist or that she's not, a secret lush. I mean, that's always possible too, right? Good Lord, look at the other congressman. But she is absolutely playing out this chart in the best ways possible, which I think is awesome. All right. Now, these are the charts for her solar returns. Now, your solar return is your personal year ahead. I'm not going to get too much into this, only because it's going to take a lot of time. So we don't have 3 hours to comb over these charts. So I'm just going over some highlights for 2018 and just do a brief examination of 2019 to see what's possibly ahead. Alrighty, so this chart is taking, or this video is taking a lot more time than I expected. So I'm going to keep this as brief as possible, and I apologize if I'm not getting into, just come back here, really specific stuff, but I'm not for two reasons. One, some of this information that you can glean from a chart, we can't verify because we don't have access to Ms. Ocasio Cortez to confirm these things. And also, some of this stuff would be very private information that honestly is none of our business. So if we can't confirm it, we can't verify it, there's no point in bringing it up, right? The other is, I don't remember what the other is. I'm so sorry. This whole thing is just taking a lot more time than expected. So this is going to be a really fast overview of her solar return, which is a solar return is your personal horoscope from birthday to birthday. So her solar return or personal horoscope from her birthday in 2018 will run to her birthday in 2019. Now, this particular birthday year is extremely important for her personally because not only is she on a Saturn return this year, and a Saturn return year is a very significant year, but she's also on an ascendant return this particular year. So she's really coming into her own at this time. And feeling very good. Now, this is specifically noteworthy because one of the things we need to remember when we have that kind of year is that it's only good for that year. Following the next year, it's a whole new ball game. So we have to not lose sight of the fact that this wave that we're riding will come to an end, and we need to be able to adjust ourselves accordingly so that we don't get thrown off, as it were, taken over by the wave as it's coming down. So for her 2018 solar return, the important times, very briefly going over the chart, are November, December of 2018. So we have some type of recognition or elevation in status. There's a sense of being very, very visible at this time. And obviously, I'm pretty sure that was the election year, right? Sorry, I'm the only astrologer I know with no sense of time. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh. Also, what we got here? Yes. Also, at the same time that this is going on, there should have been some weirdness. I wonder what that was about. There should have been some weirdness and some confusion that would have hit in November and December, but mostly maybe even a little bit of too much optimism, a little over optimism. So a disorganization would have been a big problem all through those months, November, December. Disorganization, a whole lot of promises that were made and not kept, and people being disorganized, not being able to find things. It would have been quite the kerfluffle on many, many levels of life. Now, that is November, December. In February would have been a really tricky month and maybe not so pleasant. I'm not loving it. I am not loving it. And February is very important for a couple of reasons. So the first thing is in February, we're looking at something that could possibly have felt like or been experienced as a literally almost a betrayal, or there were definitely some losses when it comes to relationships or some betrayals of trust at this time. Now, at the same time, there would have been people coming into our life, because that's a 7th house Jupiter for her, that would have represented new friendships and new support systems that would have been very, very good for her and very lucky for her. But that doesn't take the sting away from feeling like you've been, sold a bill of goods or betrayed by people you thought you could trust, which is unfortunate. Also, too, things that are very close to her heart would not have gone according to plan. So there may have been some heartfelt efforts put into things that did not pan out the way they were expected to, and that would have been February. Now, the reason this is important is because whatever was going on that was so personally disappointing for her or hurtful for her will be revisited in July. So come July of 2019, whatever this issue was in February, getting revisited in July. So it ain't over yet. It ain't over yet. All right. Now, following that, we go into March, which was just this last month. Just this last month. So this last month, she would have gone into, really started feeling her Saturn return. Yes, she would have definitely started really feeling her Saturn return. And also, we've got some, give me a second to think. Where is everything in this chart? Where is it? Where is it? Sorry. Oh, there it is. Good grief. It's like trying to find my keys. Okay. So also come March, there would have been something with her finances and her job. But it looks like her finances should have improved considerably. So something should have opened up for her financially in March, which is good. So if she was waiting for something, the ship would have finally come in come March, just this last month. So we'll see how that, well, we won't see. She'll know better than we will how that played out. But it is there. So there was a lot of supportive aspects in March. So February was a bit of and it will be revisited in July, but she should have made some very good headway with bosses and in her job and with her reputation in March. Now, skipping past that, now we're going to go into next year. So this will start in October of 2019 to October of 2020. This is going to be a very, again, another critical year, but for a very different way. So October 2018. So the 2018 solar return would have been an exceptional year for her, and certainly exceptionally good. So there was a lot of really strong things that heralded her coming into her own, with some minor issues, but definitely like on a strong foot the entire horoscope, personal horoscope year. 2019, 2020, it's a different conversation. So this is the year when she would, boy, she thought she was getting tested before. She's seen nothing yet. 2020 is the year when she's really going to get tested, and like in a big way. Ooh, kind of feeling like a diamond, and the hundreds and thousands of pounds of pressure that has to be put on a piece of coal to turn it into a diamond or destroy it in the process. That is what she's going into after her birthday next year. So it would be good for her to make as many strong, supportive relationships as she can right now, because she will need that extra support externally next year, because nobody gets through this life alone. And in that Shark Tank, you're certainly going to need assistance. Now, with that said, the big months in 2019 for her that I would watch are, again, we're right back to November, December. I don't know why that's important, but it's popping up in the 2018 solar return that we're in right now, and also the 2019-2020 solar return, which we're looking at next year. So in November of 2019, right after her new 2019 solar return starts, this is when the pressure is on. And this is not going to be an easy time. It's going to be a giant pressure cooker for her, and she will be extremely visible. So if there is anything she'd be criticized for or taken to task for or anything else, Jesus, she's really going to be in the soup, and people are going to keep her there. So what is it, bombing for apples? It's going to be like bombing for apples in a scalding, boiling lobster tank. Whee! Now, that doesn't mean that it's all bad or all lost. She can get through this with assistance, and she can keep her wits about her. This is definitely a testing of the metal time. In April of 2020 is when the real challenges start. So she's going to need very, very strong supportive relationships around her to help her keep her sea legs, as it were, on this ship as it's getting tossed and turned come April of 2020. And there is the possibility that she may lose to someone like a grandparent or somebody who's acted as a mentor for her at this time, which would be devastating. This would be a devastating loss for her. So I would strongly recommend that she keeps very, very good people around her, and I'm sure she will. But this will not be an easy time. And the unfortunate thing is the way this is looking, her challengers and opponents aren't even going to have the decency or consideration to back off if this does happen, which is unfortunate. But hey, we're talking about people who cut funding for the Special Olympics, so I don't expect a lot better from them. All right, so that is it. And now we'll go to the end of the video. So, following a couple of conversations and reading some of the other chart interpretations are popping up all over the place about Miss Ocasio Cortez's chart. Apparently, other people have had her information long before now. They managed to have it long enough to do a chart interpretation, write an article, and get it in print. So I am apparently late to this party. So, but here's something that's important that I want everybody to be reminded of. Okay. So one of the things that makes her fascinating is that she is literally one of the youngest members of Congress to get elected. And also she is coming from very common beginnings. You know, she is literally one of the people. In so much as she had jobs like we have jobs, you know, before she went to Congress. So she wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. You know, she wasn't given a job through an internship, through her well-connected family or anything like that. Like she's earned it the hard way, you know, and even her campaign was literally the hard way, door-to-door grassroots stuff, right? So this is pretty awesome stuff. Now, she did get this elevation in position under Saturn return, which again is very impressive. But here's the important thing, right? So, and if you guys have followed my work for a while, you know, like at the end of the day, everybody's job matters. Every single person who is contributing, your job matters, right? And if you don't think that's true and you actually think some jobs are more important than others, try going a week without a garbage man. Let me know how that works for you, you know, or let me know how that works for when the plumbing needs to be taken care of and there's no plumber around. Every job matters. Every job matters. So the thing about it though is there are people who, by rights, okay, and merit, as in the case of Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, or by influence and connection, as is the case of some of our members of Congress, and not actual merit, get their, you know, and Supreme Court members, when I think about it, get their positions, okay? But for people who make these meteoric rises to these unbelievable heights, okay, it's not necessarily that they have something spectacular in their chart that makes them so exceptional, you know, that of course this was going to happen. I mean, and I say this because it's important you guys understand this about your own charts. So a chart can only show potential. It cannot show you what is absolutely destined to happen. You, one, have to take the reins of those destiny yourself in your life. And two, in order for you to be in that position, you have to literally be the only part that fits in the machine in that place and that time, you know, that makes you a very necessary part of a much bigger plan. So in that case, it literally is less about you and more about the purpose or function you need to serve at that time. So Ms. Ocasio-Cortez has come into the position that she has because she is, at this point, the best voice, you know, for many of us. And that is a large part of why she's where she's at such a young age, such an unexpected way, from such common beginnings, without any other support, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So her role in history is very important because she is the bringer of light for other people. Okay. Just like Trump has gotten into his position in office, not necessarily through merit, as much as he is a necessary part in a larger evolutionary picture. And a lot of what he's there for apparently has to do with catalyzing things and certainly flushing the cockroaches out of the walls, as it were. Because he is definitely the pinpoint, you know, that is drawing a lot of energy to it and pulling a lot of scuzz along with it. So you matter. You matter, and you don't have to have a big fancy job with an amazing title and this amazing work history and all this sort of stuff for everything you do to be critically important in this life. Critically important. Okay? So when you look at your charts, you look at other people's charts, try not to get too confused with this idea that somehow a special destiny means a special chart. There are many, many people who have really impressive charts that are having very, very normal lives, you know, and there are people who have, you know, very difficult or complicated charts that have had meteoric, you know, legendary, epic changes in status and roles in history. Here, being weird. And, you know, these things are very hard to predict. And many times it's not important because ultimately it's not about our egos. It's not about our vanity. It's not about our, you know, recognition by society that we're special. Okay. when you are called to be a part of a greater mission, you are called to be a part of a greater mission, and you don't really have a choice in the matter. It just kind of happens. Okay. So the other thing is there are a lot of sacrifices that go with that, and there is a lot of painful training that has to occur to make you ready for that. Okay, because as you can see by the constant and unrelenting and insane, like stupidly petty and just Jesus, the attacks that are just, these are adults, right? I mean, and this is in Congress, which is in and of itself a Shark Tank of people you wouldn't trust 5 minutes out of your sight in the first place. So I'm sure she's had a very toughening life, that has prepared her well in terms of being thick-skinned, and being able to give back as much as she gets and more, and all this sort of stuff, so that she could fulfill, her role as a spokesperson for a lot of other people. And she didn't have to do this. But ultimately she did what felt right and came natural to her, and she came from a place of integrity, and this is where she has ended up. So if you look at your chart and you're not seeing any outstanding, fantastic aspects, don't despair, because you matter, and everything that you do has significance, especially if you're coming from the right place, the right place. And if you're looking at her chart and you're looking for these superstar aspects in your chart, you're probably not going to see them. They're not that obvious, okay? Because this blueprint is about the person developing, and the personal development has nothing to do with your job title. So just thought I'd put that out there. Talk to you guys later. Bye.